Jennifer and Garrett's journey began 15 years ago, in the fall of 2015, during an event in Nashville. Jennifer, a young real estate intern at the time, was selling raffle tickets. Garrett, just starting his career at a tech startup after grad school, was immediately captivated by her lively laugh and driven personality. Their relationship blossomed quickly, filled with coffee dates, weekend hikes, and deep talks about their future goals. Jennifer was drawn to Garrett's intelligence and ambition, while Garrett was enchanted by her determination and love for life. Within a year, they were engaged, and just 6 months later they tied the knot in a beautiful mountainside ceremony. In the beginning of their marriage, both worked tirelessly toward their common goals. Jennifer dedicated herself to her real estate career, rapidly advancing within her company. Her charisma and sharp sense for property value made her popular with clients. Jennifer had a gift for finding the perfect homes for families, which brought her both career success and personal fulfillment. At the same time, Garrett's career in software engineering took off. His creative problem-solving skills drew the attention of top professionals in the field, making him highly sought after. Garrett's late nights of coding eventually led to leadership positions and opportunities to speak at tech conferences. As their careers continued to thrive, so did their personal life. They purchased a beautiful 4-bedroom home in Oakwood Estates, a place Jennifer had instantly fallen for. Their weekends were filled with renovations and decorating, transforming the house into a reflection of their shared style and dreams. To those around them, Jennifer and Garrett seemed to have the perfect life. They often hosted dinner parties, where Jennifer impressed with her cooking, while Garrett kept everyone laughing with his dry sense of humor. They traveled to exotic destinations, sharing stunning photos of Bali sunsets and ski adventures in the Swiss Alps. Their social media profiles became a carefully crafted display of their picture-perfect life. However, as time went on, small cracks started to appear beneath the surface of their seemingly flawless relationship. The demanding hours spent on their careers gradually left little room for the passion that once fueled their relationship. Talks of starting a family were constantly delayed, with both prioritizing one more career achievement before considering it. Despite the growing distance, they pressed on, believing that their love and shared past would be strong enough to endure any challenge. Jennifer and Garrett could never have anticipated the storm that was about to shake their lives, risking everything they had worked so hard to build. The arrival of Fiona Maroney in Oakwood brought a new vitality to the neighborhood. At 33, she was beginning anew after a difficult divorce, determined to reshape her life on her own terms. Fiona's lively personality and infectious laugh quickly set her apart from the more reserved residents of the suburb. Jennifer was the first to connect with her, visiting with a welcome basket full of local goodies and a bottle of wine. The two women immediately hit it off, finding common ground in their passion for art and travel. Jennifer, who had long yearned for a creative outlet, was captivated by Fiona's tales of teaching art to middle school students and her own artistic endeavors. As winter gave way to spring, Fiona became a frequent visitor at the Hartley home. The two women spent weekends exploring local galleries and experimenting with new recipes in Jennifer's gourmet kitchen. Garrett, who initially was happy to let Jennifer and Fiona enjoy their time together, began to find himself more involved in their conversations, especially when Fiona talked about the latest museum exhibits she volunteered at. Fiona's presence invigorated the Hartley social circle, bringing a new energy to their dinner parties with her sharp wit and adventurous spirit. Fiona introduced the couple to trendy new restaurants, encouraged them to attend outdoor concerts, and even persuaded the usually reserved Garrett to try salsa dancing. For Jennifer, Fiona symbolized a freedom she had never fully embraced. She admired her friend's ability to reinvent herself after her divorce and pursue her passions unapologetically. In Fiona, Jennifer saw a glimpse of a life she had not lived, one marked by spontaneity and less concern for others' expectations. Garrett also began to look forward to Fiona's visits. Her fresh perspectives on art and culture provided a welcome shift from the work-focused conversations that had increasingly defined his interactions with Jennifer. Garrett valued Fiona's knack for bringing him out of his shell and offering him a new perspective on the world. Unbeknownst to them, this blossoming friendship was laying the groundwork for a betrayal that would ultimately upend their lives. The seeds of the affair were sown one warm evening in late April. Jennifer was away at a real estate conference, and Garrett, not wanting to dine alone, invited Fiona over for dinner. As they enjoyed a bottle of wine and watched the sunset, A new, unspoken tension began to develop between them. Fueled by the wine and the cozy atmosphere, Fiona began to share her feelings about her failed marriage. Fiona talked about feeling unloved, unappreciated, and ultimately unwanted. Garrett, touched by her honesty, found himself opening up about his own sense of disconnection in his marriage. He confessed how the long hours, career pressures, and fading passion had left him feeling isolated. In that moment of shared vulnerability, their eyes locked, and the underlying tension erupted. The first kiss was tentative, almost gentle, but soon intensified into something more passionate and urgent. Though guilt and desire clashed within them, desire ultimately prevailed. That night marked the start of their secret affair. In the weeks that followed, Garrett and Fiona wove an intricate web of lies to hide their relationship, seizing every opportunity to be together. They spent lunch breaks in hidden corners of parks, staged fake work events to meet at out-of-town hotels, and held early morning meetings that were actually brief encounters in Fiona's art studio. The affair injected a fresh sense of excitement into their lives. For Garrett, Fiona embodied the passion and spontaneity that he felt were missing from his life with Jennifer. Garrett delighted in Fiona's artistic perspective and her ability to find beauty in the mundane. For Fiona, Garrett provided stability and intellectual engagement, a welcome change from her ex-husband's unpredictability and lack of interest in her work. Despite their joy in this new connection, the burden of their deception cast a long shadow over their relationship. There were close calls, a lipstick stain quickly wiped from Garrett's collar, a text message left undeleted, and increasingly intricate explanations for unexplained absences. One notable near miss occurred during a neighborhood barbecue. While Jennifer mingled with other guests, Garrett and Fiona found themselves alone in the kitchen. They shared a heated kiss, only to abruptly pull away when they heard footsteps approaching. It was Dominic, coming in to refill his drink. Dominic gave them a curious look but remained silent, leaving Garrett and Fiona to question whether he had noticed anything. As spring gave way to summer, their affair grew more intense. They began discussing a future together, even as guilt continued to gnaw at both of them. They were aware they were playing with fire, but neither was ready to end it. Unbeknownst to them, their fragile deception was on the verge of collapse. Jennifer's first hint that something was wrong came on a sunny Saturday morning in early June. Jennifer had woken up early, planning to surprise Garrett with breakfast in bed, only to find his side of the bed empty and cold. His running shoes were by the door, but his car was missing from the driveway. When Garrett returned an hour later, looking flushed and slightly out of breath, he explained that he had taken a long run and then driven to get fresh bagels. Jennifer accepted Garrett's explanation with a nod, though a small seed of doubt was planted. In the weeks that followed, she observed subtle changes in his behavior. He became unusually attentive, surprising her with flowers for no apparent reason and spontaneously suggesting date nights. Despite his increased attentiveness, Garrett also seemed distant, often lost in thought with his fingers hovering over his phone as if expecting a message. His work hours grew irregular, with him coming home later and citing project deadlines and client meetings as the reason. When Jennifer casually mentioned Garrett's late nights to a colleague at a social event, the colleague seemed puzzled, noting that things had been relatively quiet at the office recently. Additionally, Jennifer noticed a change in Garrett's scent. One evening, as she leaned in to kiss him hello, she caught a trace of an unfamiliar perfume. When Jennifer mentioned the unfamiliar scent, Garrett laughed it off, suggesting he might have picked it up from a crowded elevator at work. Jennifer tried to push aside her growing unease, convincing herself she was being paranoid. After all, this was Garrett, the man she had built a life with and trusted implicitly. Despite her efforts to dismiss the doubts, they lingered, quietly nagging at her. Jennifer began to observe Garrett more closely, noting how his eyes brightened when Fiona entered the room and how their conversations seemed to create a private world of their own. She tried to reassure herself that these were natural behaviors. Fiona was indeed their friend, and Garrett enjoyed her company. Yet a nagging voice in Jennifer's mind suggested there might be something more. As June progressed, Jennifer's suspicions only deepened. Jennifer started checking Garrett's phone when he was in the shower and scrolling through his emails whenever he left his laptop open. Although she knew it was a breach of his privacy, she felt compelled to uncover the truth, even as she feared what she might discover. Unable to endure the uncertainty any longer, Jennifer decided to follow Garrett to uncover what he was hiding. She had no idea that this choice would lead to a revelation that would shatter her world into a million pieces. On the sweltering afternoon of June 30th, Jennifer's suspicions reached a breaking point. Garrett had mentioned at breakfast that he had a late meeting and wouldn't be home for dinner. A quick call to his office confirmed what Jennifer had been fearing. With her heart pounding and palms sweating, Jennifer decided to follow Garrett. She called in sick to work something she had never done before and parked her car a block away from their house. As Garrett's car pulled out of the driveway, Jennifer followed at a cautious distance, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. To her surprise, Garrett didn't head toward the city but instead drove to a serene, tree-lined street on the other side of town. Jennifer's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the area. Jennifer watched with growing dread as Garrett parked his car and walked quickly to Fiona's front door. Fiona answered almost immediately, greeting him with a smile visible even from down the street. As the door closed behind them, Jennifer sat in her car, numb with shock. Jennifer had suspected, but witnessing it firsthand was a different experience altogether. Unable to endure the thought of what might be happening inside, she got out of her car with trembling legs. As she approached Fiona's house, her mind was a storm of confusion and anger. Through a gap in the living room curtains, Jennifer saw Garrett and Fiona locked in a passionate embrace, completely absorbed in each other. The sight struck Jennifer like a physical blow. She staggered back, a choked sob escaping her lips. In that instant, her entire world collapsed, shattering every memory, shared dream, and promise of forever. Everything was now tainted, corrupted by the betrayal she had just seen. Blinded by tears, Jennifer stumbled back to her car. She sat there for what felt like hours, alternating between gut-wrenching sobs and numb disbelief. When Jennifer finally drove home, her mind was racing. She wasn't ready to confront Garrett, yet she needed time to think and plan her next steps. The thought of Fiona, her former friend, going about her day as if nothing had happened, made Jennifer's blood boil. Unable to shake the fury, she found herself driving to Fiona's house. She parked across the street and waited. When Fiona emerged to water her front garden, Jennifer was out of her car in an instant. Fiona's eyes widened in surprise, and then fear as she saw Jennifer approaching, her face a mask of fury. What followed was a confrontation that would be etched into both women's memories forever. The confrontation erupted into a storm of accusations, denials, and, ultimately, painful admissions that would set off a chain of tragic events. In the days following her encounter with Fiona, Jennifer moved through her life like a ghost. She performed her duties at work, forced a smile for the neighbors, and kept up a facade of normalcy with Garrett. Inside, she was seething, a cauldron of hurt and rage ready to boil over at any moment. Jennifer had decided not to confront Garrett right away, telling herself it was because she needed time to think and decide her next steps. But deep down, she knew the truth: she was plotting her revenge. The idea came to her late one night as she lay awake, listening to Garrett's steady breathing beside her. If he could betray her with her best friend, why shouldn't she do the same to him? The idea of hurting Garrett in the way he had hurt her brought a grim smile to Jennifer's face. And she knew exactly who would help her execute her plan: Dominic Feldman, Garrett's best friend since college. Dominic had always been a constant presence in their lives, the perpetual bachelor who moved from one casual relationship to another. Jennifer had noticed him eyeing her appreciatively more than once over the years, though he had never acted on it out of respect for Garrett. As Jennifer's plan began to take shape, she started paying closer attention to Dominic. She observed how his eyes lingered on her when she wore flattering outfits, and how he always seemed to position himself near her at social gatherings. Dominic seemed perfect for her plan. Jennifer began to create opportunities for them to be alone together, setting the stage for her scheme. She enlisted Dominic's help with small household tasks when Garrett was away and invited him over for coffee to discuss a fitness plan. Each time, she turned up the charm, letting her touches linger and laughing a bit too heartily at his jokes. As she put her plan into action, Jennifer felt a perverse sense of justice. Soon Garrett would understand what it felt like to be betrayed by the two people he trusted most. The possibility that her actions might also hurt Dominic barely registered in her mind, overshadowed by her need for vengeance. Little did Jennifer know that her carefully laid plans were about to unravel spectacularly, setting off a chain of events that would end in tragedy. On a sultry evening in late June, Jennifer set her plan into motion. She invited Dominic over, claiming she needed help with a leaky faucet, knowing Garrett would be working late. When Dominic arrived, she answered the door in a silk robe, her hair tousled, and holding a glass of wine. Dominic's eyebrows lifted slightly at her appearance, but he kept his usual friendly demeanor. As he worked on the faucet, Jennifer lingered nearby, asking about his day, laughing at his jokes, and finding reasons to brush against him. Once the job was finished, Jennifer suggested they have a drink to cool off. She led Dominic to the living room, sitting close to him on the sofa. As they talked, she gradually steered the conversation toward relationships, lamenting the lack of passion in her marriage. Jennifer leaned in, her robe slipping open slightly. "Dominic, I've always wondered what it would be like between us," she murmured, her hand resting on his thigh. Dominic froze, his eyes widening in shock. He gently removed her hand from his leg and put some distance between them on the couch. "Jennifer, what are you doing?" he asked, his voice a mix of confusion and concern. "You're my best friend's wife," Jennifer pressed on, desperation seeping into her voice. "Don't tell me you've never thought about it, Dominic." "I've seen the way you look at me," Jennifer said, her voice low and urgent. "We could keep it a secret." Garrett would never have to know. Dominic stood up abruptly, and humiliation washed over Jennifer as she watched him gather his things. She had been so sure he would be receptive, convinced her plan would succeed. As he reached the door, Dominic turned back, his expression a mix of pity and disappointment. "I won't mention this to Garrett," he said quietly, "but I think you two need to talk with that." The door closed behind him, leaving Jennifer alone with her shame and shattered plans. She sank to the floor, tears of frustration and anger streaming down her face. How had everything gone so wrong? She had only wanted Garrett to feel the same pain she was enduring, to grasp the depth of her hurt. As the initial shock of rejection began to fade, a new fear took hold of Jennifer. Despite Dominic's assurance, Jennifer couldn't shake the fear that he might still tell Garrett about her attempted seduction. The thought of Garrett finding out and holding the moral high ground, despite his own betrayal, was unbearable. Little did Jennifer know that her worst fears were about to come true, setting the stage for a confrontation that would lead to tragedy. The following evening, Jennifer was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard Garrett's car pull into the driveway. Her hands trembled slightly as she chopped vegetables, bracing herself for the moment she feared would come. Garrett entered the house, his footsteps heavy, and his greeting was noticeably devoid of the usual warmth. Jennifer's heart raced as she heard him approach the kitchen. When she turned to face him, the look in his eyes confirmed her worst fears. Dominic had told him everything. "Jennifer, we need to talk," Garrett said, his voice tight with barely contained anger. "What the hell were you thinking?" Coming on to Dominic like that, the knife clattered from Jennifer's hand onto the cutting board. "How dare you stand there and judge me when you've been screwing my best friend behind my back for months?" Garrett's face paled, his anger giving way to shock. The argument between Jennifer and Garrett grew increasingly heated, their voices echoing through the house as they rehashed old grievances and hurled accusations at each other. Amidst the chaos, Jennifer's mind raced. In the back of her mind, she remembered the gun that Garrett had insisted they keep for protection. It was hidden in a lockbox in their bedroom closet. In a moment of desperation, she knew she had to make a choice. The thought of retrieving the gun crossed her mind, and she could feel her heart pounding as the gravity of the situation sank in. Jennifer's hands trembled as she opened the lockbox and retrieved the gun. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions: rage, betrayal, and fear. As she descended the stairs, Garrett's voice grew more frantic, his confusion turning into panic. She stood at the top of the stairs, the weight of the gun heavy in her hands. Her vision blurred with tears as she faced Garrett, the reality of what she was about to do hitting her with full force. The air between them crackled with tension, each breath feeling like a lifetime. Garrett's fear was palpable as he took a step back, his hands raised in a defensive gesture. "Jennifer, put the gun down," he pleaded, his voice a strained whisper. "This isn't the way to handle this." Jennifer's vision was still clouded by rage and hurt, but a sliver of doubt pierced through. She wavered, the gun shaking as she struggled to control her breathing. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on her, and she found herself torn between the overwhelming desire for vengeance and the stark reality of what her actions might bring. Garrett moved closer, trying to calm Jennifer with a raised hand. Her finger pressed down on the trigger, and the sharp crack of the gunshot shattered the quiet, leaving a heavy, stunned silence in its wake. In the eerie stillness that followed the gunshot, Jennifer remained motionless, her hands trembling around the smoking gun. Garrett collapsed onto the floor, and the sharp odor of gunpowder mingled with the unmistakable scent of blood seeping into the beige carpet. Jennifer stood frozen, unable to comprehend the reality of what she had just done. She watched Garrett's still form, half expecting him to rise, to shout, to do something, anything. Instead, he lay there, a dark stain spreading across his chest. Her anguished scream shattered the quiet of the suburban evening. Jennifer cradled Garrett's lifeless body in her arms, her sobs mingling with the blood soaking into her clothes. As she rocked back and forth, tears streamed down her face. The distant wail of approaching sirens grew louder, a stark reminder of the impending consequences. Jennifer realized she should flee, to hide the crime she had committed, but her legs wouldn't move. She remained by Garrett's side, her mind replaying the events that had driven her to this tragic point. The sirens grew louder, a grim soundtrack to her despair. Jennifer's thoughts swirled around the memories of happier times, the slow erosion of their marriage, and her ill-fated plan for revenge. All of it felt insignificant compared to the weight of her actions. The front door slammed open downstairs, and the sound of police officers' heavy footsteps echoed through the house. The once quiet home became a flurry of activity as law enforcement swarmed the scene. Crime scene technicians meticulously examined the house, taking photographs and gathering evidence. The bedroom, marked by the blood-stained carpet and the discarded gun, became the central focus of their investigation. Detective Eva Ramirez, an experienced homicide investigator, took the lead in the case. Detective Ramirez found Jennifer in the living room, covered in blood and in a state of shock. Her responses were detached and brief. Despite her condition, Jennifer was read her rights and taken into custody. At the police station, the shock began to wear off, and Jennifer was overwhelmed by a torrent of emotions. Amidst her sobs, Jennifer confessed to shooting Garrett, recounting the series of events that led to that tragic moment. Detective Ramirez listened attentively, jotting down notes as Jennifer relayed her story of betrayal, jealousy, and ill-conceived revenge. While Jennifer's statement was being recorded, other officers were diligently working to piece together the details of the case. Neighbors reported hearing the couple's argument growing louder throughout the evening. Fiona Maroney was brought in for questioning, her tear-stained face revealing her guilt and sorrow as she confirmed her affair with Garrett. Dominic Feldman also provided a statement, reluctantly recounting Jennifer's failed attempt at seduction and his conversation with Garrett about the incident. Dominic's testimony painted a picture of a marriage on the edge, pushed to its breaking point by infidelity and deep-seated misunderstandings. Forensic evidence supported Jennifer's confession. Gunshot residue was found on her hands, and the bullet extracted from Garrett's body matched the gun registered to him. The courtroom was packed daily with spectators eager to witness the unfolding drama of love, betrayal, and murder. The prosecutor painted a damning portrait of Jennifer as a woman consumed by jealousy and rage. She highlighted the premeditated nature of Jennifer's actions, from her failed attempt to seduce Dominic to retrieving the gun during the heated argument with Garrett. Fiona Maroney's testimony proved pivotal in the trial. Tearfully, she recounted her affair with Garrett, admitting the pain and damage it had caused. Her evident remorse and guilt seemed to sway some jurors, bolstering the defense's narrative of Jennifer as a wronged wife driven to a breaking point. Dominic Feldman's testimony was equally impactful. He described Jennifer's failed attempt to seduce him, his voice heavy with discomfort as he detailed the encounter. Yet, he also spoke of the deep love he had always seen between Jennifer and Garrett, implying that their actions were out of character and driven by extraordinary circumstances. Throughout the trial, Jennifer sat quietly at the defense table, her once vibrant presence overshadowed by grief and regret. When she finally took the stand, her testimony was a heart-wrenching account of a marriage unraveled by miscommunication and betrayal. With tearful sincerity, she expressed deep remorse for her actions, stating that she would willingly trade places with Garrett if she could. 2 weeks later, at the sentencing hearing, Judge Harriet Goodwin pronounced Jennifer's fate. Considering the circumstances of the crime and Jennifer's lack of a prior criminal record, the judge sentenced her to 18 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 15 years. As Jennifer was led away in handcuffs, the tragic end to what was once a happy marriage was sealed. The cautionary tale of the Hartleys would linger in Oakwood, a somber reminder of how swiftly love can transform into hatred and the profound consequences that betrayal can bring.